Lord, I am here. But which version of me is here, I can no longer say. The version that smiled and agreed throughout the entire work meeting, even as every cell in my body screamed in disagreement. The version that laughed loudly at the jokes during the get-together with friends, while inside feeling like a complete stranger, an actor who infiltrated a party to which he wasn't truly invited. Or maybe the version that called his parents and said everything was great, wonderful, because the truth of my exhaustion and confusion would be too heavy a burden, a worry I don't feel I have the right to cause. I don't know which of them is kneeling now. Perhaps all of them, exhausted, have collapsed together on the floor of my soul, and that is why the weight feels so unbearable tonight. The word tiredness is too gentle. It's a silk sheet trying to cover a mountain of sharp rocks. What I feel is a seismic exhaustion, a fracture in the very foundation of my being. It is the exhaustion of a soldier who has fought on 1,000 different battlefronts in the same day, defending borders that are not even his own. My body aches. My jaws ache from forcing so many smiles. My eyes burn from trying so hard to look interested. My mind is a constant buzz, a social data processing center that never shuts down, analyzing every glance, every word, every silence, trying to predict the next move on the chessboard of human acceptance. I close my eyes to sleep, and my mind begins the day's replay, an autopsy of every interaction. I should have said that. Why didn't I agree faster? Did they realize I was pretending? It is a personal, silent, and private hell from which there is no escape, because my torturer is myself. Today was a particularly difficult day. In the morning meeting, my boss presented an idea that I, in the depths of my soul, knew was flawed. I had the data, I had the arguments. I felt an impulse, a spark of authenticity, wanting to raise my hand and say, with all due respect, I see a problem with this. What if we considered another approach? I felt the sentence forming in my throat, the words ready to leap out. But then I looked around the table. I saw the agreeing faces, the enthusiastic nods. I calculated the risk, being the only one to disagree, being the difficult one, being the bearer of bad news. And fear, as always, won. The spark died. I smiled, nodded along with the others, and even added, "That sounds promising, a great vision." The momentary relief of not having created friction was immediately replaced by a wave of self-loathing so strong it nearly choked me. I sold myself out for a handful of superficial peace. I betrayed myself in exchange for a safe, warm place in the group's conformity. Later, I met friends for coffee. They spoke with fervor about a TV series I tried to watch and found unbearably empty. But they loved it. It was the topic of the moment. So, what did I do? I dove into the performance. Wow, amazing, right? And that scene in the 3rd episode? Genius! I heard myself speaking and felt a profound estrangement. That was not my voice. Those were not my words. I was a parrot, repeating the sounds of the environment to be accepted as part of the flock. And they accepted me. They laughed with me, agreed with me, included me. And with every smile of approval I received, an abyss opened within me. Because the connection I so desperately sought was happening, but not with me. It was happening with my representative, with my stunt double. And the loneliness I felt right there, in the midst of people who supposedly like me, was the most painful of all. It is the loneliness of being a fraud. This need to mold myself, to be a chameleon, has become my default mode of operation. I no longer know how to do it differently. I arrive at a place, and the first thing I do instinctively is scan the environment. What is the code here? What is the dominant emotion? What is the acceptable opinion? And in seconds, I adjust. I become what the environment needs me to be. I have become a mirror. The problem with being a mirror, Lord, is that a mirror has no image of its own. It only exists in relation to what is in front of it. And when the mirror is alone, In the dark, it is just an emptiness, a nothingness. And that is how I feel now. Empty, a nothingness. Exhausted from reflecting others without ever having had a light of my own to emit. I try to go back in time in the archaeology of my soul to find where my original structure collapsed. And I find memories. Small earthquakes that together brought my building down. I remember, with a clarity that burns, being about 7 or 8 years old. I loved to draw fantastic creatures, worlds that only existed in my head. One day, I proudly showed a drawing to an adult, a relative. He looked, frowned, and said, "Why don't you draw something normal, like a house or a tree? People are going to find this very strange." Strange. That word, it dug into me. That day I learned that my imagination, my uniqueness, was a source of shame. It was something to be hidden. I started drawing houses and trees, and every straight, predictable line was a shovelful of dirt on the tomb of my creativity. I remember my adolescence, that desperate desire to belong to a group. I remember starting to like the bands they liked, even though I thought the music was just noise. I remember laughing at jokes I found cruel, so as not to be the target of them. I remember hiding my books, my nerdy interests, because they didn't fit the cool image I needed to project. Every small act of self-denial was a promise of safety. If I am like them, they won't hurt me. They will accept me. And it worked. I was accepted. But the price was my identity. I sold my soul in exchange for a seat at the popular table, and discovered too late that the food served there had no taste. And this dynamic extended to everything, to my values, to my dreams. How many times did I silence a conviction of mine because it was unpopular? How many dreams did I shelve because the people around me would consider them unrealistic or silly? I became the curator of the museum of others' expectations, and the largest item in my personal collection is a collection of dusty resentments. Yes, Lord, resentment. It is the toxic sludge that accumulates at the bottom of my soul's well. I smile at people, but inside I feel a dull anger towards them for making me feel like I need to perform. And I feel an anger 1,000 times greater at myself, for my weakness, for my cowardice, for volunteering for the role of a doormat. It's an anger I cannot express, of course, because that would be unpleasant. So I swallow it, and it corrodes me from within, turning my interior into an acidic and barren landscape. And in the midst of all this, I ask you, do you still recognize me, Lord? Beneath all these layers of plaster, of paint, of false smiles and calculated agreements, does your original creation still exist, or did it suffocate and die a long time ago? I am afraid of the answer. I am afraid that if you were to rip away all my masks, there would be nothing underneath. Just a vacuum, a hollow space shaped by the outline of the expectations of everyone who has ever passed through my life. The idea that I am nothing more than the sum of my performances is my deepest terror. That is why I am here, because the exhaustion has become greater than the fear. The weight of all these false skins has become more unbearable than the dread of being naked. I cannot stand another day. I no longer have the energy for the calculation, for the performance, for the lie. The actor is refusing to go on stage. The play must end, and I don't know how to end the show. I don't know where the emergency exit is in this theater I built myself, so I cry out to you, the director, the author, the only one who knows the original script. I am not asking you to refurbish the theater or to applaud my pathetic performance. I am asking you to storm the stage and rescue me. I am at my limit, and from here, from this cold floor where my strength has finally run out completely, I begin my prayer. And here I am, Lord, on the floor, a tangle of melted masks and exhausted characters. And from these ruins, my true prayer begins to be born. Not the rehearsed prayers, not the pretty words I thought you wanted to hear, but the raw cry of my naked soul. And I begin by confessing. I hand you the competent professional, and I confess that beneath his facade of control lives a boy terrified of the possibility of making a mistake. I hand you the fun friend, and I confess that his loud laughter is often a shield to hide a sadness so deep he is afraid of drowning in it. I hand you the docile son, and I confess that his constant willingness to serve is also a form of manipulation, an attempt to buy a love he fears he doesn't deserve unconditionally. I hand you my social media avatar, and I confess that every post is a cry for validation, a pathetic attempt to convince others and myself that my life is worthwhile. I place them before you one by one, all my false identities. I name them, I expose them to your light, and I confess my great sin, the sin that gave birth to all the others, idolatry. I betrayed you, Lord. I broke the first and greatest of the commandments, because you said to have no other gods before you, and I built an entire pantheon, the god of public opinion, the goddess of social acceptance, the god of professional success, the goddess of the perfect image. I have spent my entire life serving these cruel and insatiable deities. I have sacrificed my peace on their altars. I have burned my joy as incense for them. I have offered my own identity as a blood sacrifice to appease their wrath. And they are never satisfied. The more I give, the more they demand. They are false gods, and they have led me to spiritual, emotional, and physical bankruptcy. Forgive me, Father. Forgive my foolishness. Forgive my lack of faith. Forgive me for believing that the approval of creatures made of dust was more valuable than the smile of the creator of the universe. Forgive me for turning my life, which should have been an act of worship to you, into a long and pathetic audition for an audience that doesn't even truly care. And now that I've confessed, I ask, and my request is the most terrifying one I have ever made, because it threatens the entire security system I have built around myself. I do not ask you to make me stronger to endure the masks. I ask you for the strength to let them fall. I do not ask you for people to like me as I am. I ask you for the grace to survive if they do not. My plea, the cry of my being, is this: Lord, introduce me to myself. I am a stranger in my own house. I don't know what I truly like. I don't know what my real convictions are. I don't know the sound of my own laughter, the one that isn't meant to please anyone. I lost myself so long ago that I no longer know the way back. So I ask you, be my guide. Take my hand and lead me back to the starting point. Show me who you were creating before I began to interfere with your work. Reveal to me my original design. What brought you joy when you thought of me? What gifts did you plant in my soul? What colors did you use to paint me? I need to know. I desperately need to build my identity on something solid, and there is nothing more solid than your intention for me. I renounce the need to be understood by everyone. I renounce the need to be invited to every party. I renounce the need to have my posts liked and shared. I renounce the addiction to approval, and I ask you, fill the void that this renunciation will create. Fill it with your truth. When the voice of fear tells me they will reject you, I want your voice to whisper louder, but I welcome you. When insecurity tells me you are not good enough, I want your grace to remind me you have already been justified. I want to exchange the lies of the world for your eternal truths. So please, Hear the cry of a prisoner who is exhausted from pretending to love his cell. Invade my prison, break down the door, and teach me, step by step, how to walk in the light of authenticity, even if the light at first hurts my eyes, so long accustomed to the gloom of falsehood. And after the storm of prayer comes the calm. A different kind of silence settles in. It is not an empty silence, but a full one. The exhaustion still weighs on my body like a lead blanket, but the frantic agitation of my mind, the buzz of anxiety, has ceased. It is the peace that comes after total surrender. The peace of one who has finally stopped fighting a war they could never win. I don't feel a wave of ecstatic joy. I don't feel a supernatural strength. I feel stillness, a deep stillness, like the bottom of an ocean after the storm on the surface has passed. I get up from the floor, my knees crack, my whole body feels like a map of aches. But something has changed in my inner posture. I don't have a plan, I don't have answers. But for the first time, I don't feel the desperate need to have them. The need to control, to calculate, to perform, has been surrendered. And in its place, there is a space to breathe, a space for maybe, just maybe, you to act. The test is not long in coming. Of course, it isn't. The universe, or perhaps you yourself, Lord, seems to have an ironic sense of humor and impeccable timing. My phone vibrates on the table. A message from a group of friends, a picture of all of them at a bar, smiling, and the question, "Are you coming? We're waiting for you." My body reacts on autopilot. My heart races. My stomach tightens. Cold sweat begins to form on my forehead. The old script starts playing in my head at full volume. They're waiting for you. You have to go. If you don't go, they'll be upset. They'll think you don't care. They'll stop inviting you. You'll be alone. Go. The urgency is almost irresistible. My mind is already formulating the reply. I'm on my way, running a little late, but I'll be there soon. It's easy. It's safe. It keeps the peace. It maintains my image as a present and fun-loving friend. But then, something else happens. The memory of the cold floor, the memory of the cry, the memory of that new and fragile stillness. I look at the phone screen, at the smiling faces, and for the first time I allow myself to ask the question, do I want to go? And the answer comes from a deep place, a place I haven't visited in years, and the answer is a loud and unequivocal no. I don't want to go. I don't want the noise. I don't want the small talk. I don't want the performance. Want the stillness I have just found. I want to stay here, in this sanctuary that my surrender has created. What do I do? The internal war is violent. On one side, a lifetime of conditioning, screaming at me to go and please. On the other, a newly planted seed of self-worth, whispering for me to stay and honor myself. I hold the phone with a trembling hand. I remember my prayer. Give me the courage to be rejected. I take a deep breath, and I start to type. My fingers feel like they weigh a ton. I delete the sentence 3 times. The temptation to make up an excuse, a sudden illness, a last-minute commitment is immense. It would be easier, less confrontational. But it would be a lie. It would be returning to the same cell from which I've just asked to be freed. So I choose the truth, the simple, unadorned truth. I type, so cool that you're all together. Happy for you. I'm going to stay home tonight. I need to rest my mind. Have fun for me. And I press send. The sound of the message being sent is like a gunshot in the silence of my room. And then, the terror, the wait for the reply. My mind projects all the catastrophic scenarios. They will mock me. They will remove me from the group. They will call to pressure me. Every second of waiting is an eternity. I want to throw the phone away. I want to go back in time and delete the message. Lord, I whisper, my heart in my throat, stay with me. Whatever the answer is, stay with me. And then, the phone vibrates. The reply has arrived. I close, my eyes afraid to look. I force myself to open them, and I read. It's from one of my friends. And the message says, "No problem, man. Get some rest. We'll see you next time. Hugs." And that's it. No drama, no rejection, no catastrophe. Just simple human understanding. And the wave of relief that washes over me is so intense that my legs feel weak. I sit on the bed and I start to laugh. A laugh that mixes with tears. I laugh at my own madness, at the monsters I created in my head, at the prison I built with fears that were, perhaps, largely imaginary. And I cry. I cry with gratitude. For the first time, I didn't perform. I was honest about my needs, and the world didn't end. On the contrary, I felt more connected to that friend through his simple, honest acceptance of my simple, honest truth than in years of fake laughter and agreement. It was a small victory, a baby step, but to me, it felt like I had just moved a mountain, the mountain of my own fear. That small victory, the no sent by text, became a cornerstone in the rebuilding of my life. It wasn't an earthquake that changed the entire landscape at once, but it was the first time I had hammered a nail into a solid foundation, the foundation of my own truth. The feeling that followed was not euphoria, but a deep, strange calm. It was the calm of a prisoner who, after years in the dark, cracks open a window and feels the fresh air for the first time. The air is good, but the eyes are not yet used to the light, and the body still feels the pains of confinement. I knew, instinctively, that a door had been opened, but that the journey out of the prison would be long and would require me to learn, to walk again. The days that followed were a laboratory of micro-revolutions. I began to treat every small choice as an opportunity to practice authenticity. At work, during a discussion about a project, instead of my immediate and empty agreement, I tried a new phrase. I need a moment to think about this. It was a neutral, non-confrontational response, but for me, it was an act of monumental power. It gave me the space to consult myself, not to react out of fear, and later I could return with an honest contribution instead of a sycophantic echo. People didn't look at me with disdain. They seemed to respect the thoughtfulness. And I realized that the competence I tried so hard to project through agreement, in fact, manifested much more in honesty and reflection. But the path of authenticity is not a field of flowers. It is also a minefield, and I stepped on a few mines. There was the day a family member asked me for a considerable favor, a favor that would require me to sacrifice my only day of rest for the week. The old me would have said, "Of course, no problem," in the blink of an eye, and then would have spent the entire week stewing in resentment. The new me, still trembling, took a deep breath and said, with all the gentleness I could muster, "I love you very much, but this weekend I really can't. I need this time to recharge my batteries. I'm at my limit." The reaction was not the understanding acceptance of my friend. It was a cold silence, a palpable disappointment, and later, the veiled accusation. "You've changed. You're becoming selfish." Those words, they were like daggers. They hit my most primal fear head on. The alarm siren went off in my head. Alert! Imminent rejection. Abort mission. Apologize. Go back to being who they want you to be. The temptation to call and say, "I was wrong, I'll do whatever you want," was almost physical. I felt a pain in my chest, a desire to cry. In that moment of agony, instead of running to the phone to put out the fire, I ran to my inner sanctuary. I locked myself in my room and simply said, aloud to the silence, "God, this hurts. Their accusation hurts. But my exhaustion also hurt. My falsehood also hurt, and I chose this pain. Help me bear it. Remind me that your acceptance does not depend on their approval. Remind me that taking care of my own soul is not selfishness. It is wisdom. And I stayed there with my pain, but not alone in it. And I did not give in. And I survived. And I learned a crucial lesson. Freedom has a cost. And I was, finally, willing to pay it. I understood that some people loved my function, not my person. And differentiating the two was painful, but absolutely liberating. In the midst of these battles, I began to discover clearings of unexpected joy. I allowed myself to revisit passions I had buried for being strange or useless. I went back to writing poetry, something I hadn't done since adolescence, when someone laughed at my verses. I wrote not to publish, not to impress, but simply for the pleasure of playing with words, for the relief of giving shape to my feelings. I bought a box of colored pencils and went back to drawing my fantastic creatures, and every colorful monster born on paper was an act of rescuing that 7-year-old boy who had been shamed. They were small, secret joys, springs of pure water, bubbling up in a desert. They did not depend on any applause. They were mine. They were real. And they began to heal me from the inside out. My relationships began to go through a natural filter. Some friendships, those based purely on my ability to be a good passive listener or an always available party companion, dissipated like mist. There was a sadness in this, a mourning for those lost connections. But the space they left began to be filled by something much stronger. True friendships deepened. When I began to risk being vulnerable, to share an insecurity or a fear instead of rejection, I found empathy. I discovered that my real friends also had their own masks, their own struggles, and my courage gave them permission to be a little more real too. Our conversations gained texture, depth. We stopped talking only about external things and started talking about the inner life. And I realized that true connection is not born from shared perfection, but from welcomed imperfection. My identity, which was once a mosaic of others' reflections, began to find a center. The question, who am I, ceased to be a source of panic and became a journey of discovery, an adventure I shared with you. I began to understand that my identity was not something I needed to find like a lost object. It was something to be received from you, my creator, and to be built day by day through small, courageous choices. Today, my life is not a picture-perfect commercial. The exhaustion has not completely disappeared because living in this world is tiring. Fear has not been eradicated because to be human is to be vulnerable. The difference is that exhaustion no longer defines me, and fear no longer rules me. They are just passengers in the car of my life, but they are no longer at the wheel. Driving now is my identity in you, an identity that is learning to be resilient, to be honest, to be free. I still have bad days. Days when a criticism hits me harder than it should. Days when the temptation to put on an old, comfortable mask is strong. But my recovery is no longer measured by the absence of falls, but by how quickly I get back up. And today, I get up faster, because I know where to run. I run to you. I run to the truth that your acceptance is my ground, and it will never shake, no matter how strong the storm of human opinions may be. My prayer today is different from that desperate prayer on my bedroom floor. It is no longer the cry of a prisoner. It is the grateful song of a freed man who is still learning to handle the sunlight. It is a prayer of maintenance, of vigilance, of gratitude. Lord, I say now, thank you for this day of freedom. Help me to be brave,